Morning, this is a response to contrapoints. Hello there Nick, your video, metaphor and knowledge. In this video you're talking about metaphor and how, I just wrote down what you said actually, you said that you talk about cosmologies mirroring political situation of the society which generates them. So for example you talk about that medieval cosmology of the great chain of being, with presumably God at the top and minerals at the bottom, as you say, and how that mirrors the authority structures in place at the time, with kings at the top and serfs at the bottom, I guess. And then you later go on to talk about the changes in that and how Darwinian theory of evolution kind of maps onto laissez-faire capitalism and that kind of survival of the fittest in economic and authority terms. What I'm not sure about here in this video, Nick, is whether you're saying that the kind of scientific metaphor, if I can call it that, let's stay with the Darwinian one because that clearly is a metaphor, whether the scientific metaphor is drawn from the social situation, or whether the social situation, the political situation, and the scientific idea are both drawn from a common metaphor. Because at times you seem to be saying the former, but I think it's more likely to be the latter. Because as you know, ideological systems, political systems are incredibly abstract. A free market economy is an abstract entity. We only understand free market economies by the extensive use of metaphors, as you know, whether that be the invisible hand of the free market or the various kind of social Darwinism language that attaches itself to that in terms of kind of conflict and competition. So I guess I'm just saying that it seems to me that it's more likely that social systems, political systems and scientific theories both tend to draw on metaphors which have, I don't know, kind of fashion at the time perhaps, although there may be some bleed across, like the great chain of being, the hierarchy one is clearly a height metaphor, isn't it? Where superiority, both literally and metaphorically, is associated with elevation. So the higher up the totem pole, the higher up the mountain, the higher the top bunk of a set of bunk beds is a superior position, and that maps onto both the social situation of popes and priests and lay people, the authority position of kings and aristocracies and vassals and serfs or whatever, and also to kind of cod versions of science, which you even see. And similarly with the Darwinism experiment, or that kind of metaphorical exchange that you get there. I think it's quite interesting that you talk about Darwin not exactly getting his ideas from laissez-faire capitalism and the kind of bourgeois competition amongst merchants. You don't exactly say that he gets his ideas from that, but you seem to be suggesting that it's far easier to think about Darwinism when you're in the presence of that kind of social situation. And then of course latterly that feeds back, isn't it? So that kind of practice starts to become referred to as social Darwinism, which is slightly odd. Again, I think it's more likely that they're drawing on a common metaphor to do with struggle, to do with fighting, to do with two men enter, one man leave, that kind of logic really. Okay. I thought it was really interesting what you're saying about how communism promises, the failures of communism, because it seems to me that they're both Darwinism and evolution by natural selection and the great chain of being still tend to draw on very similar metaphors, a subtle difference. It's almost as if there's been an evolution of the height metaphor between the great chain of being and kind of Darwinian evolution. It still uses height metaphors. Dawkins still talks about climbing Mount Improbable, with evolution as an ascent. But it seems to be in the great chain of being model, you're assigned your position on that hierarchy, whether you're superior or inferior, according to the whim of a deity. Whereas, of course, in Darwin's model, the perception of how that works, whether it's accurate or not, is one of a large number of people scrambling to climb up a greasy pole and standing on the fingers and the heads of those below them, or occasionally assisting one another. But broadly speaking, it's the same kind of hierarchy, at least in perceptual terms, but a very different way of getting to that position, to one's branch on that particular totem pole. Do you have branches on totem poles? Either way, you know what I mean. But when you talk about communism, of course, communism tries to flatten those things out, or tries to at least present itself as a picture in which there is no hierarchy, there is no totem pole, there's nowhere to climb to, there's no deity to assign you to a particular level, and there's no competition. So yeah, I can see why communism would necessarily restrict access to that metaphor, and necessarily, I guess, because of that, constrain the kinds of thinking you can have in relation to the development of a scientific theory which relies to a certain extent upon that metaphor. Yeah, anyway, thanks very much for that. Bye.